So with the new Call of Duty season right around the corner with the release of Vanguard, the CDL, guys, is in a very interesting place. And we've talked about, Call of Duty and in the future of the CDL, where we kind of see things going. But I want to talk about, in this segment of the show, specifically Optic Dallas, the rumors, the speculation that are going on behind the scenes with this team before they release their official roster to the rest of the world. I want to talk with all of you about a couple of things that concern me about Optic Dallas and how this is kind of somewhat creating a little bit of some negativity within the community, but it's also creating what I think to be something that's not really good for the CDL as a whole. It's kind of creating this dangerous precedent. So let's talk about it. So, guys, obviously Optic Dallas is the logo's been leaked. Scumpy has said that he signed a contract, and there's been a lot of talk and speculation around Optic Dallas. Now, for very good reason, because Optic obviously is one of the faces of Call of Duty. You could say they're still like the face of COD, because FaZe is obviously, pretty much the biggest esports team in the world. They kind of took somewhat of a step back from Call of Duty. I mean, they just won COD champs, don't get me wrong. But as far as the faces of COD, I feel like that went to Optic. It used to be Optic and FaZe. FaZe even maybe a little bit more so than Optic. But I feel like Optic has like the roots of Optic. I mean, Hex is going to like all of the events and, so on and so forth. He supports the COD team more than any of his other teams. And so it's very deeply rooted in Call of Duty. So that being said, obviously Envy being, the E Clasico matchup between Optic and Envy is something that's incredible. But with this speculation, obviously the rumors and rumblings that Optic and Dallas are merging. Essentially Envy, but not so much Envy, it's more the Dallas Empire and Optic, Chicago are merging together as one. And with that happening, obviously there's going to be some logistics and, some issues on that front. And obviously there's going to be some roster spots that get taken away because you're merging two teams together. And so that being said, there's been a lot of talk that Optic's bringing some of their guys over, to the Optic Dallas merger, that being like Dashy and Scumpy. And then obviously, on the other side, you've got a couple of guys that are going to be coming back for Dallas from Empire. But there's one name that's being left out of all of this, and that is Crimsix, the GOAT, the greatest Call of Duty player of all time, the winningest in history, the greatest, okay, is being left out of all of this. Now, obviously, I'm going to give you guys some of my reasons as to why I believe this is happening. But why I think that this wasn't necessarily the right move per se. Obviously, I think kind of that the Optic and Dallas, that merger happening, really created what could be some negative ramifications. Number one, we already talked about this, guys. You guys can check all my Call of Duty League content here on the YouTube channel. But I had stated that, when we talk about, obviously the Chicago Huntsmen and the Dallas Empire, these two teams, started from the very beginning. They were some of the first Call of Duty League teams ever. Like they were kind of like some of the founding fathers, right? And obviously created fan bases around them. Then when Optic was bought out or bought back by Hex, it changed. It went from the Chicago Huntsmen and it came back to Optic Chicago. And then you have Dallas Empire. So Optic Chicago, nothing wrong with that. I mean, I think it's awesome that they got Optic back. I was super excited for Hex. But the Chicago Huntsman was this brand that was being built, and the Chicago Huntsman obviously is no more. I believe that should have been a team that was sold off. I understand that they changed the name to Optic Chicago, but you're going to see where I'm going here. Because from Optic Chicago, now it's going to Optic Dallas. So what's happening in Chicago? Is that team is it just a vacancy now? Is it, the Huntsman? I felt like the logo to everything was awesome, and then it's just ripped away from Chicago. It goes to Optic Chicago, but now it's Optic Dallas. Dallas. And so what I'm getting at here, guys, is if you're, from Chicago or you're a big Chicago fan, whether that's the sports teams, this is not the best way to make your Call of Duty team, kind of structured, because obviously it's been ripped from you a couple of times. You start cheering for the Chicago Huntsmen, then it moves over to Optic Chicago, and now it's Optic Dallas. And so I feel like that's a negative ramification. But even more so, I believe, for the Dallas Empire. The Dallas Empire, guys, won the very first Call of Duty League championship. And you're already changing the name from Dallas Empire to Optic Dallas. So is Empire going to be able to go to another city, that being like Pittsburgh? Are they going to be the Pittsburgh Empire? Or is it just going to be a team that was at some point a team and no longer at this point? Obviously, guys, we're in the very early days of the Call of Duty League, but looking into this, it just doesn't look good from a very starting stage of the Call of Duty League to be changing these teams so much. The Chicago Huntsmen to Optic Chicago to now Optic Dallas. Dallas Empire is gone. Optic Chicago is gone. Obviously, Chicago Huntsmen is gone. I just don't really like it. Now, do I like that they're merging together to create a super team? I love it. I absolutely love it, guys. LeBron James, greatest basketball player of all time, I believe. He kind of put his legacy in his own hands by going somewhere else, building a team, going back home to Cleveland, wins championships in Miami, championship in Cleveland, goes out to LA, does it again. I love that concept. But he didn't leave in the wake of that. He didn't leave, even though the Cleveland Cavaliers were never the same after he left, the Cleveland Cavaliers still existed. It's not like they were just done. They were gone and forgotten about forever. The Chicago Huntsmen are no longer. Optic Chicago, no longer. Now it's Optic Dallas. And this leads me to the next thing, guys, because even though, if we want to move past that and say, fine, those teams are no longer, obviously in traditional sports, even though we don't like to compare traditional sports to esports, I do it quite often, but a lot of times we don't like to necessarily compare those two because they are two different things, and the way that we're doing it in esports is different than traditional sports. Traditional sports typically are, like football, for example, is an American sport. It's not so much worldwide, whereas esports, for the most part, is worldwide. And there's differences there. But let's get to my biggest issue with this. Obviously, we don't know yet what the official roster is for Optic Dallas. But if you're telling me that Optic Chicago and the Dallas Empire, in order for them to merge, Hex came with some things that he essentially he had to have said, listen, this is what has to happen if we merge. And then obviously Hastro probably said, this is what has to happen if we merge. And I'm really wondering, one of those things on the table was Scumpy and Crimsix. Crimsix, the greatest of all time in Call of Duty, and you have Scumpy, who's best friends with Hex. And, obviously he's, getting closer and closer to the end of his career for sure. There's been a lot of talks of retirement, things of that nature. But if Hex would have said, which I'm wondering, and I'm assuming here, guys, that this is something that, I have no insider information on this, and we don't even know if this roster is 100% accurate, but if he would have came to Hastro and said, look, you can't have Crimsix on the team, and Scumpy's got to be that guy who's on the team. From a business perspective, Hastro probably is thinking to himself, well, okay, business-wise, Scumpy's got a bigger fan base. Obviously, the numbers are going to show when he streams and all of those things. It makes sense. Crimsix doesn't get the numbers that Scumpy does, but Crimsix is a better player, in my opinion, than Scump at this point. So really, a lot of this, I've been a little bit critical lately of Hastro because there's always been this emphasis on we're not really so much focused on content. We're focused on winning championships. And now it seems to me, if these rumors are true, that's changing over at Envy. They are now taking this approach. Now, unless they think they can win a championship with Scump, I don't see it happening. However, it very well could happen. I feel that Hasbro almost gave up on trying to win championships, instead now to not only just create content, but just to create a bigger brand. And that is something that, look, from a business perspective, it does make sense, guys. It really does. It makes sense. But if you're trying to compete to win championships, that is not a move you make. Crimsix, now I'm not saying that Scump is the worst player on this roster currently as it's assembled. I mean, he might be, but I think that, let's just say he's not the worst player. I would definitely have probably gotten rid of like Dashie and replaced him with Crimsix, or one of these other guys. I just think that Crimsix, now my other thought and theory is that Crimsix and Scumpy still aren't getting along whatsoever, and so that could be something there as well, that they're not going to play together. They don't want to play together, and they're just kind of going their separate ways. I just don't like this from a couple of different perspectives, even though from a business perspective, it makes a lot of sense. And I'm wondering if it was more a business decision for Hasbro to say no with Crimsix than anything. But it's interesting how things are changing so quickly in the Call of Duty League. And I love this idea of merging together to create super teams and to try to build something really, really special. But I just, it's an interesting ordeal. I would have actually really liked to see, the Optic Empire. I think that would have been really cool. I understand that they want to have like a city attached to it, so Dallas Optic or Optic Dallas makes a little bit, of sense, obviously. But, it's one of those things, guys. It's interesting. Obviously I'm going to continue talking about this as we go here, and I'll give you more information as it comes up. It's a big topic of conversation. What do you guys think about it? Let me know in the comment section down below. And for more Call of Duty League content and videos, stay here with Zero TV.